or activate your microphone and feel free to, jump into the conversation. It's a lot more dynamic and fun, and I think informative when it is, an open forum type. I put my as a side lesson here, I put all of my slideshows these days into Google Slides. And one of the reasons why is because I love this captioning feature. So I'm rolling my cursor down below this title screen here, and I'm going to caption this presentation. Oddly enough, it does force me to think about what I'm saying a little more as I watch the captions myself go across the screen. So I hope you like this feature. Some of you may have already seen it at some presentations and stuff, but live captioning like this is a relatively new technology, so I'm enjoying it quite a bit. All right, so just so we have a common understanding about what a rubric is, I'm satisfied with this definition in terms of a rubric being a scoring guide with a set of criteria to help students understand what your expectations of them are.
Goody.
There you go, Alan. We heard you. And but also, to ensure objective grading across all assignments. So students have sort of an internal understanding that what they are being evaluated on is not whether the instructor likes them or not. It's really some clear-cut criteria that is stated usually beforehand for the student on an assignment, or as we see here, a research paper, a project, a portfolio, etc. So, here, why use rubrics? There are lots of reasons to use rubrics. I'm not going to read you every single bullet here. I've helped departments develop departmental rubrics, which really help provide consistency in evaluation across a whole program. So and what's what I like in our context here, I like to think of if a class breaks off into another section because of high enrollment, that the adjunct instructor also, who comes in kind of cold into a course, at least can provide some consistency in the evaluation process for assignments inside of a course. So in other words, if the criteria under which students will be evaluated is consistent, I think it helps that adjunct instructor very much as well. They also help students understand, as I mentioned before, the expectations of a particular assignment beforehand. I highly recommend showing students what the rubric is, or at least what the criteria is beforehand. Any questions?
None that I'm seeing yet.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure, as you can see, guys, my style is not to read you the slides. I know you can read on your own, so I think it's a little more valuable to you, if I comment on each of the slides rather than read them out to you. So let's take a look at what is this? How do I implement a rubric? If you've never created one for your students, a lot of times the instructions for a document sort of serve as an informal rubric for students. And by that, I mean, a lot of times we tell the students what we want we tell the students about our expectations for them in the instructions for assignments, usually. And I'll, in a little bit, I'll try to connect the two when you're actually creating a rubric to use those in what you tell them in the instructions. but there are a lot of rubrics available to you. And so if you Google rubric for an expository essay, you will get hundreds, if not thousands, of responses. And what I recommend you do, if you're interested in creating a rubric for a particular assignment, is be very specific with in Google when you do a search, and then riff off of what's already been created. So we really don't need to recreate the wheel here. A lot of there's a lot of common criteria and attributes in assignments that have already been expressed as rubric criteria in rubrics. So I highly recommend researching it before trying to come up with your own criteria. I would also recommend, again, if it's your first time creating a rubric, as the slide says, start small. But look at those instructions that you have probably already created for students, and make sure that there's some kind of alignment between what you told students you want them to do on an assignment and the evaluation criteria that you're going to sort of plant into the rubric. So rubrics also, we'll see a picture of this in a second, but they, in Blackboard Learn, they call them achievement levels, but essentially they usually spell out not only the criteria for how students will be graded on a particular assignment, but also different achievement levels for each criteria. So I think you'll see some of the default language in Blackboard is novice. I'm not remembering the rest, but we'll see it in a slide in a second. But differentiating performance levels is usually embedded into most rubrics. So there is an exemplary, preferred, evidence of completion of assignment, of a particular assignment, and then there are varying levels below that exemplary level. And as the slide tells you, what we want to do is put some kind of numerical scale, be it percent or points, for each of those levels. So in Blackboard Learn, the rubrics, once you choose one of these levels for student performance, it assigns a point value to that, and the points are accrued automatically. So I'll get into that in a second. So here we are in Blackboard Learn, and I think, for any learning management system that provides rubrics, a lot of these processes will apply to other learning management systems. So I apologize for the sort of like the narrow scope of this of my visual presentation here, but I think my experience with other LMSs is that in some form or function, they're all kind of similar. So in Blackboard Learn, under Course Tools is where you find the Rubric Manager. And what you do, there are only a couple of buttons. Now you can import a rubric if you have already created one for another Blackboard course, and you want to use it for a course that doesn't have a rubric. You can now export and import Blackboard rubrics. This is relatively new functionality within the past couple of years, but it's very handy. If you have a colleague that has a rubric that he or she is willing to share, you can, again, sort of isolate it as a file and import it into your own course. So they're much more portable than they used to be. And once I click on Create Rubric, sorry, I'll just go back for a second. If I were to click on that button that says Create Rubric, this is what appears by default. And it does sort of illustrate, what I was talking about in prior slides. On the left-hand side, you have the default criteria. Those of you familiar with Blackboard know that you can click those chevrons, those down arrows, and you can edit these criteria. You can also add criteria. That's the button that says add row. A little techno speak here in terms of tables and that kind of thing. But if you add a row, you essentially add another piece of criteria, and you can add an achievement level. So over on the right-hand side, all those cells we see are what Blackboard calls achievement levels in their rubrics. And those are the terms that were eluding me before: novice, competent, and proficient. So you see the chevrons next to those. We can edit those as well. I usually like to, because we read from left to right, I like to take the highest level, which here is labeled proficient, and drag that over to the left and go from proficient down to novice using the terminology here on this slide. I usually change proficient to exemplary. And I'm usually okay with 3 achievement levels in some of my courses, particularly for pronunciation assignments. I usually go with 2 achievement levels, but the simpler the better in terms of these rubrics. Again, it really is sort of an intellectual exercise for a lot of instructors to, kind of put assignments under a microscope in terms of what are we looking for from students. And I enjoy this process immensely with faculty, because it really is an introspective exercise in terms of defining exactly what student behaviors we want to see. Now, I should add here too that as with design, with instructional design, we do want the rubric to reflect the nature of the discipline. So a rubric and an assignment and its accompanying assignment looks a lot more authentic when these features here are actually, as discipline specific as possible. Because what they reveal to the student is, maybe in the professional world of my discipline, this will be an attribute that will be important for me to cultivate and develop. So I encourage as much discipline-specific language here in the rubrics as possible. All right, any thoughts or questions now?
Not yet.
Okay. So here's a rubric that is filled out. Someday I'll have to change the graphic on this slide, because again, I'll just reiterate, I like the achievement levels to be the highest achievement level first and work its way toward the right in terms of declining levels of achievement. But here, again, this is just to sort of illustrate the default and then what something looks like when it's actually filled out, and what would, if we choose to display this for students before they start an assignment, this is what it will look like without the chevrons. There'll be no chevrons in the student view of things. But again, another way of talking about rubrics is calling them preset narrative feedback. So essentially, each of these, each cell is a little tiny narrative of achievement, or let's say a behavioral outcome, achievement of a behavioral outcome on an assignment. And sometimes I characterize rubrics when I talk about their expediency. as in that scenario where we, as instructors, we grade a stack of papers. I know many in the room remember that. We have stacks of papers, and we find ourselves writing the same exact comments on several of our papers. Rubrics help us avoid all that. And because those comments, those like comments, are usually things that we didn't teach as well as we thought we had. And so, or perhaps something we didn't tell students that we wanted to see on an assignment, but you know, here we are in the grading process, and we have to write it out for them because it's an important feature of the assignment itself. So this is rubrics help us avoid this. Again, with this notion of them being preset narrative feedback for students. So certainly, even in the grading process, which I'll show you in a few slides, even though it could be, you know, we're checking off these different achievement levels, and it's all kind of preset and very fast for us, quite expedient for the instructor. The student gets a lot of feedback when we just sort of click on these different cells that represent you know, how they did on an assignment, and instead of like good job, they really get sort of a lot of feedback in terms that is salient for what we had stated beforehand. So I like that feature about rubrics, in that the student gets a lot of rich feedback if the rubric is filled out, you know, like the one on the slide here is. Quite a bit. What we want in these cells is language that is measurable. Okay, that you know, if you tell students you want to see 2 or 3 sentences on such and such, then you know that there's a number, 2 or 3 sentences in the rubric cell, and so the more measurable and less subjective the language is in these cells, the better. Okay.
Rob, this is a good place to ask a question that came up in the chat.
Great.
You know, when you were talking about preset narratives and you know, having this for the students ahead of time, Maureen has a question. How do you deal with faculty objections that rubrics are a roadmap and they maybe don't want to give away the steps to the student before a project?
Yeah, I've come up against that question before as well, and I don't see why it needs to be one or the other. I mean, you could even in creating a rubric, you know, you get to weight all these things, but you could have, you know, sort of an open, you know, open forum type criteria as well. Like if you want to leave leave a section for, you know, improvisation or creativity, or you know, students sharing their own thoughts, you know, that kind of thing. I don't think they need to be as rigid as perhaps I'm presenting them. You do have room in a rubric always. I think it's on this next slide. It's a few slides out, but you always have room for your own narrative feedback in the evaluation process. So I think there's room for both. You know, I understand how some can say that this is maybe a rigid way of going about things. But you know, as you know, so what I would say to a faculty member, you know, that has that observation would be, great. Let's take another look at the rubric. Perhaps we need another go. You know, teaching is an iterative process. So if an instrument that we're using looks like it could be faulty in any way, you know, I think that can make for a very productive session in looking at the instrument and making the instrument work as well as we can make it work. So I hope that satisfies you, Maureen, as an answer. You know,
Absolutely, and she appreciated some of that criteria. I also have a question from Michelle. Michelle, did you want to ask that question?
Yeah, so looking at the rubric, like if it's competent is 50, proficient 100, because I've thought about using these a lot, but I guess the
yeah,
problem is, if I say they're competent, like they didn't tell me everything I was hoping to see from the lecture or the video or the what they read, whatever. So competent, I give them 50. That means, and I usually grade discussions out of a point system. So let's say it was out of 30 points, and now they get a 15 out of 30,
yeah,
which is really a 50.
yeah,
So the competent should almost be more like maybe like an 85, which would be like a B. Like you're missing, you're not, you didn't give me everything, which would be 100, but you're
yeah,
close.
yeah. So all those percentages, in addition to being on the left-hand side of the slide, we see 33%, right? That's the whole criteria. That, in other words, that whole row is worth 33% of the entire grade. And then the percentages inside are percentage for just that criteria. All those percentages and or point values, because they can be point values as well, can be adjusted. And I totally agree with you. The defaults are somewhat draconian in that you get 100% for exemplary or proficient um, achievement, and you get 0% for novice achievement. Well, that would never fly in my classroom. I mean, even I teach foreign language, so even an attempt at doing an assignment, to my mind, to my teaching style, would be, somewhere around 60%. So, I mean, that's where
Right.
the percentages would start.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, because this is perhaps a poor example in terms of, real life applications. Sorry, go ahead. Something else, Michelle?
Oh, nope. That was all. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Thanks, Rob. I think we're caught up on questions.
All right, great, great. I'm just going to look at my clock. It's actually behind me. I know we're probably going to run out of time. So
We're down to 5.
I know. Sorry. So here's an implementation. Just to give you a quick view of how to implement the rubric in a discussion forum. All the students' submissions appear on the left. Those of you familiar with Blackboard discussions know that everything is sorted out by student. So I see all of the students' submissions on the left, and on the right I have my rubric, which I grade with. And as you can see, again, preset narrative feedback, I simply click on each of these achievement levels. And what happens is I become extremely familiar with my rubric, usually if I don't remember all of this stuff, 2 or 3 after grading 2 or 3 students, and it goes really quick in terms of the grading process. I read, I click on these criteria and the achievement levels. Just another view here. And then as you can see on this slide, at the bottom, I can provide my own feedback. I can also, the grade tallies up automatically in that little tiny field under raw total. But if I were to, I can change that by hand as well. If I look at it and I say, no, I'm sorry, at a future point, I need to alter the points on this rubric, and I can, put in my own grade here. So I do have, an alignment worksheet. Just if you want to check out, if you want to align your learning objectives to your assessment instructions, as I mentioned before, those instructions for a particular assignment to the rubric criteria, it's a process, but it's totally worth it. Here's one that's already filled out to an extent, and this is just copy paste. This is what I told them that the learning objectives were. This is what I put in the assignment, and then I started teasing out things from my instructions for the assignment, just as a brainstorm as to what the rubric criteria would be. And this can get you going in terms of creating your own rubrics as well. So I'm going to stop there. And are there any other questions and or observations?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So we're asking about the presentation. I can make the slides available. I also put in the chat just now a YouTube link. Rob gave a lengthier presentation on rubrics just last week as part of our Remote Teaching Institute Flexible Instruction Series, and so that was recorded. And you can watch that at your leisure when you have a little bit more time to kind of delve into this. We'll also put the recording on our registration site along with the slides. But yes, it is something that does take time. So
I
thanks,
dropped
Rob, for
I
posting
dropped the
link
link
there.
in the chat. Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you,
that's
everybody.
great. Thank you. I'm going to share a quick plug for next week, which is actually, or no, not next week. I think we're in 2 weeks now is the next one. So the self-serve and self-paced resources and course templates. That back to school session will be August 26th, again at noon. And as I mentioned before, that online teaching bit.ly is our link to our YouTube channel playlist. And you can register for the next in the series there on the registration site, as well as take a look at all of the fall webinars that are coming up. We have them listed for you through December. All right. So thanks, everyone, and thanks to Rob. I appreciate your time and sharing around the rubrics. We had some good dialogue there and good conversation.
Good.
Great. Take care, everyone.